Tonight on Bridge City News, the vociferous voice in one of Canada's largest cities as thousands take to the streets. And millions refuse to stay quiet in the United States as George Floyd is remembered in his hometown. Elmo explains why the world is taking a stand against racial injustice.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Good evening, I'm Loris Alexander. Thank you for joining us. Protesters took to the streets of Vancouver. We've seen these demonstrations across North America and around the world in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd. The 46-year-old man died in police custody. His last moments were captured on video showing a police officer pinning him to the ground with a knee on his neck. Floyd's death has galvanized people to stand up against racism and call for an end to police violence against marginalized communities. Protesters aren't staying quiet in the U.S. It is now day 13 of demonstrations south of the border. The largest one is in Washington. Tens of thousands of people gathered in the newly renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza before marching through the city. They're relentless with their demands for change.
We're tired. Yeah. We're angry. We're tired. We're overtired. Every single time we see a murder, we see our brothers, we see our uncles, we see our fathers, we see everybody in those murders. So we're done. So we're out here as long as it takes. We're out here for days. Days. I go home, I go to work, I come back out here, and I'm out here. Until we fix institutional racism, until we are not disproportionately impacted by evictions, by housing, by criminal justice reform, by policing, until as long as it takes, we're going to continue to put the pressure on and make sure that we fix and dismantle these systems.
White people need to start to grapple with that type of data and information, see how they can help make a change, not only on like a policy level through voting and engaging in their local governments and in their federal elections, but through their community as well, and getting to know more people who, some people live in a bubble only with people of their own ethnic, racial, or religious group. Get out and meet more people, engage with more people, learn from more people.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
I think a large part of it is recognizing our privilege and how we can use it as a tool for positive change. I think the first step is recognizing your privilege as a white person in this country and using it and getting the word out there, doing your part, advocating for legislation, that kind of stuff. And I feel like that's the first thing, is educating yourself and listening to others and hearing stories that we can't fathom and we can't understand.
I think that after this, young people are going to go out there and vote, and we're going to see some real change. Because already there's been changes right now. Yeah. So like small, but it's better than what we've had before. Times are better now than they were in the 60s and the 40s. Yeah. Just a little bit better. Yeah. So like I'm hopeful that this generation, all these people out here are going to vote, and the world's going to start seeing a turn for the better.
There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of distrust of police and the government. There are people who are craving to be heard and to be seen and to have their humanity recognized. And we had the opportunity to send that message loud and clear on a very important street in our city. And that message is to the American people, that Black Lives Matter, Black humanity matters, and we as a city raise that up as part of our values as a city. Listen, there are so many things that I could respond to in that tweet, but I think that we all have to just refocus on what's in front of us.
Meanwhile, in North Carolina, George Floyd's body arrived for another memorial service. Many attended a show of support for the man who's become the nation's symbol of police brutality and calls for change.
As soon as we came on the premises, I felt a wave of emotions. Both she and I were talking about how we started like feeling overwhelmed, this sense of grief and wanting to cry. And then upon walking through and seeing him lying there, first of all, I was just praying that God would bless his soul to be at peace, because he didn't have peace in his final moments here on earth. So I was just praying that God bless his soul to be at peace.
I have felt for decades like I was kind of a lone voice. You know, when I would be with other white people, they would say things that I would either have to challenge, ignore, or feel extremely uncomfortable. And when I'm with people of color, I know the situation, just observing it, haven't seen it firsthand. But really, for the first time, I see people looking at each other, coming together and saying, let's work together.
Around the world, people are energized by what is happening in the United States. Thousands gathered in the heart of London, holding up Black Lives Matter signs. The British government had warned people to stay away because of the pandemic. The UK is still under a partial lockdown and mass gatherings are banned. A lot of protesters were wearing masks, but there was little to no social distancing. You're never too young to learn about racism and how to stand up to it. That's the message of a special town hall put on by CNN and Sesame Street.
I'm Big Bird, and I want to live in a world where people don't judge people by the color of their skin, fur, or feathers.
I'm Abby, and I want the world to be fair. And I want everyone to feel included, because we're all magical.
I want us to live in a world where the word racism is replaced with the word love.
A grassroots volunteer group, Love with Humanity Association, is stepping up to help with the COVID-19 pandemic. They are gathering and putting together care packages for those in isolation who may not have strong social or family networks to help with groceries.
In COVID-19, we have two initiatives going on here. First is Community Food Bank is providing more facilities to our Calgarians, and second is our project is in COVID-19 is Drive on Wheel.
The Drive on Wheels campaign drops off food hampers for people in isolation during COVID-19.
Syed likes to put flowers in all of the hampers, so one woman came and she just started crying when she saw the hamper, and so I was already back at my car. I'd called her and let her know that it was at her door, and she was just so happy. Like, it brought her to tears seeing flowers too, and she is a senior, elderly.
This is the food hamper here, and it has a non-perishable food items, cane, pasta, all these necessities items. And with include this, we are giving one Get Full Soon card.
The volunteers at Love with Humanity Association are passionate about their work, some even tearing up as they speak.
I think giving back is really important, especially during these times. So if we tend to give more from our heart, we feel better, more happy. So if you haven't experienced that, you've got to.
It's heartbreaking to see, families who were in a position at one time to be able to afford their regular groceries easily, but just to see them struggling, it's tough.
Another need being fulfilled at this time is taxes.
What people is looking the tax filing, need people, some volunteer over there to help out those tax filing is free of cost.
Hassan says the grassroots organization's community food bank is a hot commodity at this time.
Right now it's going very, very fast, and people coming is to open 24 hours, no registration required. Whenever you like, you come and take it.
The federal government has struck a deal with Bombardier to manufacture jets for the Canadian Armed Forces Executive Fleet. Bombardier will produce 2 Challenger 650 jets for the Department of National Defense. The jets are used to transport the Prime Minister, the Governor General, and cabinet ministers. Yesterday, the company announced it's slashing 2,500 jobs in its aviation division, citing a drop in demand for private jets. Timothy Keller, a popular Christian author and pastor, announced the news of his pancreatic cancer diagnosis on Instagram and Twitter Sunday morning. Keller said he has felt God present and felt physically great as he underwent initial tests, biopsies, and surgery. He sees it as an intervention that doctors caught the cancer when they did. In his statement, Keller says, "I have terrific human doctors, but most importantly, I have the great physician himself caring for me." Conor McGregor has announced his retirement for the third time in 4 years. McGregor abruptly made his latest declaration Sunday morning on his Twitter account, where the former two-division UFC champion also announced his retirement in 2016 and 2019. Recapping one of our top news stories, it is now day 13 of demonstrations south of the border. The largest one is in Washington. Tens of thousands of people gathered in the newly renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza before marching through the city. And a look at weekend weather. Today, overcast with a 50% chance of rain showers and a high of 12 degrees. Tomorrow, cloudy in the morning with scattered thunderstorms and a high of 16. Churches have found new ways for congregations to worship during the pandemic. In some cases, engagement is up, but that doesn't mean there aren't any struggles. Pastor Kelly Stickle explains the impact of COVID-19 on the church. That interview is up next.
The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted many nonprofit groups around the world, including churches. How can the church survive during these difficult times, these dark times? Kelly Stickle is the lead pastor of My Victory Churches in Lethbridge in Southern Alberta. Welcome back to BCN.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Hal.
Pastor Kelly, let's talk about how much has changed for the church the last few months with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you share a bit about what your church has gone through, especially when it comes to services?
Yeah, well, of course, mid-March, all of the services got closed down in person in the buildings. So we transitioned into online services right away, which wasn't that difficult for us because we were already online anyway. But of course, not having a live capture in a room becomes extremely difficult. Not having the people in the room became very, very difficult, not seeing them, not being able to minister to them in the same way. And so we've had to make quite a bit of adjustments.
Let's talk about how that's really impacted your congregation, because you can't be there in person to counsel them, to hug them, you know, to help nurture them as well, spiritually.
Yeah, absolutely.
How challenging has that been?
It's been the most challenging part. For us, the online service was the easy part. The difficult part is being able to find and connect with and minister to people and meeting their needs where they're at without being able to see them and reaching out to them. And we've got over 3,000 names on our list that we've been trying to contact and call and make sure that everyone's okay and nobody's slipping through the cracks. So that's been navigating some interesting times.
Have some of the congregants been in favor because of the COVID-19 pandemic of just viewing it online and saying, you know what, I'll just stay at home, thank you, until everything passes?
Yes, yeah. Most of our congregation have been happy to join us online. Lots of them miss being with each other in particular and in the building, but a lot of them have been very comfortable with online, but we're excited to get back to gathering together.
Now let's talk about how you've been reaching out to the community, the non-church community. My Victory's had a great reputation for doing that in the past. What have some of the biggest needs been in our community that you've seen?
Yeah, there's so many needs, mental, physical, spiritual needs. We've been active in the community before this whole event happened, the crisis happened with My City Care. And so again, it was something that we already set up for and ready to go, but we've accelerated our reach, and we've been basically partnering with the city in Lethbridge as well as the two food banks here, and we've been predominantly putting our focus on food distribution and helping with food and to those that are isolated. And to date, I was just told the stat on the way here, to date over the last 10 weeks, we've helped over 10,000 people, 10,000 individuals with food or supplies in this time.
Mostly in Lethbridge here? Or
mostly in Lethbridge, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about maybe some of the single moms that you're helping, you know, maybe young families, some of the seniors as well. What kind of feedback are you getting from them?
We're getting amazing feedback, really encouraged. We're getting to the isolated. We're helping feed some of the homeless that have been put into hotels and different things. We've been feeding them. We've been helping those who have been in isolation, not able to get out to get groceries. A lot of the seniors who can't get their own groceries, we've been able to deliver to their doorstep and distanced and helping a lot of those people, and we're getting amazing feedback.
Have you had a chance to maybe reach out to some impacted by COVID-19 here in our community?
None of the infected people, we haven't reached out to them. There's been so few cases, really, to be honest, in Lethbridge and in southern Alberta, and so we haven't ministered to anybody that's in an active case.
Have you had any challenges finding volunteers to help with My City Care as well? Because people may be concerned about being infected from COVID-19.
Actually, no. Our volunteers are amazing. We've had no problem. And one of the I think most encouraging thing, Hal, is over the last while. It's not just our church that stepped up. We've had a number of other churches in the community that have sent volunteers to My City Care and to what we're doing. And so we've had an abundance of volunteers, and they've been amazing. We've been able to fully activate and do that. And of course, it makes it difficult. The most difficult part is that you're only allowed to have gatherings of 15 volunteers at any period of time. You have to stay within those guidelines. And so that's been the more difficult part than actually finding the volunteers.
And now the province has said that you can have up to 50 people in the church for a service, but I mean, come on. That's a pretty small service, pretty small get-together, right? 50.
It is for us. I'm happy that the province is taking this step. I really am. I think probably the churches most affected in this whole thing is the small churches, and because we have, as a larger church, we have the technology. We are already online, like I said. We have the staff to be able to do that. But a lot of the smaller churches I've really been feeling for. And so I think opening up at that size is great. But it's really difficult for us as a larger church. I mean, a gathering of 50. So we've taken a different approach to this. And we've encouraged our small groups, our home groups, to begin meeting in person and take that step. And we're opening up in June with our volunteers. We're doing invite-only services, and we're bringing in 50 volunteers at a time to train them for when we can open up a little bit further to some of the new regulations and new ways that we're going to have to do church, what the new normal is. So we're taking that as a period of time, the 50 as a time to train.
I'm just thinking as well at the same time, could you offer more services perhaps?
Yes.
Maybe a 9, 11, a 1, a 3, a 5.
Yeah, we already offer 3 services in Lethbridge, and then plus a couple services in Tabor, and then a service in Claresholm, in Lloyd, and Okotoks as well. So we've had multiple services already, but so we're talking about all possibilities. How many do we do, and how many can we do? And
now you do some counseling as well, Pastor Kelly. Let's discuss a little bit about meeting the needs of your congregants, and especially spiritually and mentally right now. A lot of people are feeling isolated, and rates of suicide, depression are going up because we can't interact with other human beings.
Yes.
Right?
I think I don't know if you realize this, but I think for me personally, I've realized how little emphasis I put on interpersonal contact.
Those relationships. Yeah.
And how much they feed us and our emotions. I was with a senior yesterday and I had to help him out of a vehicle in a car, and I put my hand on his back to help him out of the vehicle, and he looked at me and gave me the biggest smile and said, having somebody touch me again, he says, that just touched my soul. And I was like, you don't even realize it was just a hand on the back and not that big a deal, but we really are meant for interaction, and human beings isolation is a prison sentence. That's the highest punishment you can possibly get is to be isolated, and so this is difficult on a lot of people, and it's affecting a lot of emotional health. I think it's affecting marriages, it's affecting parents with children, lots of that going on.
Also addictions as well.
Addictions
people, right?
are up, and so there's a lot of things that this crisis, I mean, the numbers may be going down with the virus, but I think we've got a lot of effects, long-lasting effects that we're going to have to work through for a number of years, I think, yet.
What about the financial hit that the church has taken as well? I mean, congregants come in, they want to do a tithe or an offering, right? But a lot of times if they're at home, they may not be as apt to go online and maybe make a donation to the church online. It's like, I'll get around to it. Never happens. Yeah. So let's talk about the financial toll that you've taken as well.
Yeah, it's there's extra pressures when you're completely reliant on donations, as churches are. And then basically your main source of income is taken away, which is the gathering of the offerings in a service is taken away from you. Transitioning everybody online is difficult, and it does take a toll and an effect for sure. We've been blessed. Most of our people have responded and have helped. But I've been counseling a lot of pastors and talking to a lot of pastors that is not the case, and they've been hit a lot harder. Trying, how do we encourage people to get online and give? And I think now churches need that financial boost, and so I'd encourage anybody and everybody. This is not the time to pull back or hold back or wait until churches need the offerings to keep coming in.
And churches need that worship service. They need the singing. But at the same time, the province is saying, no, you're going to spread the COVID-19 virus by spitting as you sing. Yeah. Those are challenges as well for you, because that's a big part of the service and worshiping God, right?
Yeah, that is a new law for those who aren't aware. The government has said we can gather. We're not allowed to gather with a children's ministry as of yet. Yet daycares and day camps can gather. So we have a daycare in our facility that the kids can come in and be daycare under restrictions 5 days of the week. But on Sunday we do a service. They're not allowed to be in the children's ministry. So those are some of the complications. And then this whole congregation,
conflicting, right?
Yeah, it's conflicting. And then this whole idea of we can gather but we can't sing. Like singing is somehow like the worst thing you could possibly do. It doesn't feel like our church. That's singing is a big part of our church, a big part of
yes,
everyone's
I've been to your church a few times, like a rock concert. When you go, right?
Yeah, it's music is a big part of it. So we're having to navigate all of those things, and we're hoping that as things open up a little bit more, that we'll be able to open up. But have to find creative ways around all that.
I can imagine. Now, Pastor Kelly, you said you've met with other pastors as well. What are some of their biggest concerns during this COVID-19 pandemic?
The biggest concerns as we start talking about opening up again is the biggest concern is still the perception and the fear and the idea now of people being afraid to come back to church even when it does open up.
Is it more some of the seniors that are
well, no, I think it's more young people, to be quite honest. I don't know if if you go downtown shopping, it's not the seniors that are hiding at home. They're all out shopping. It seems to be.
So I don't care. I want out. That's it.
And that's amazing. So
good for them.
Yeah, it is. But there's a lot of people that are cautious, and some, that are vulnerable, and some that, they should be. But I think there's going to be, one of my biggest concerns, and pastors I've been talking to, biggest concerns is this growing divide between, this is crazy, and we should just get together anyway, and forget all these stupid rules and meet regardless. And then you got the other camp is like, this is going too fast, we shouldn't meet yet at all, and it's growing divide even in congregations. And I think unity in this time is probably the biggest thing we need to be aware of and fight for.
Have you chatted with some of the government officials as well, expressing your concerns? Not just your concerns, but some of the other pastors here in southwestern Alberta?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
How did that go?
It's gone well, very receptive, very open. We've made some headway in some things, and in other areas not so much. But I've got the sense from our government they're very much listening. I think they're proceeding very wisely. I think we're seeing the results in Alberta where they're proceeding wisely and stuff. So they've been very receptive. It's been an encouraging time that way. And what I've am sensing is a growing trend of more interaction between the church and the government, and I think that's only healthy.
How do you feel about the fact that the government says restaurants, pubs, and bars can have up to 150 people, but the church only 50 people? And I mean, a lot of these servers are actually touching the food as they're bringing it out to your table. Yet communion, you can't participate in that just yet.
No.
There's, again, a little bit of a conflict there. Like, what's going on?
The regulations this week actually state that no food can be served in a church. Communion is one of those things. And if you want to socialize and eat, a meal, go to a restaurant after the service is what the regulations state. So
wait a minute.
I'm like, wait a second. Like, where is the discrepancy? There are a lot of discrepancies going on, and in fairness, there's a lot of things moving very quickly, but there's a lot of discrepancies that don't make a lot of sense in some ways where it's okay to meet for instance, with a group of 6 in a restaurant from 6 different households if we want, with no social distancing, but yet we can't be within 6 feet of any individual outside of our home in a church service. So
how does that make you feel then?
Is
that frustrating?
Bizarre. It's very frustrating because we feel like we're being held to a different standard, for for reasons that we're not certain of as to what they call churches. Gatherings are, some of the most dangerous out there, and super spreader events and all the rest of these things. And yet I see gatherings happening all over the place where I'm going, well, how is that gathering any different than what we're doing in the church? And it feel at times that we are being put in a box as churches, that we are, we're all in small buildings. We're all super huggy and touchy. We all sing, I don't know how it's dangerous, or something happens in there that it becomes this dangerous event. And we have state-of-the-art facilities. We use social distancing. We do all the same regulations. We're very cautious and careful, and we care for our people as well. And so when you're being forced in regulations where people can gather in a facility away from yours, and you're not held responsible for what can happen in your facility, it's very frustrating.
How about tapping into some federal funding, like a lot of other groups have done? And churches and nonprofit agencies, do you have that opportunity?
We've had access to some grants that we're doing because of My City Care, and because we're helping with some of the needs in the community. And so we've been able to access some of that. No federal grants as of yet. But again, when it came to talking about, a lot of these businesses get funding or aid and this kind of stuff, churches and charities haven't been considered in that. And so we've been okay. We're large enough, and we've been managing well, and so we're not in a destitute situation. So I don't want to sound like destitute, but there's a lot of pastors I'm talking to and a lot of churches that I'm really concerned about whether they will survive.
Well, and some churches don't own their own buildings as well.
Yes.
Are they getting a break from the landlords?
Right.
Some of them are clear title, great. They don't have to worry about it. But other ones, the landlords, they're saying, we want our money.
Yeah, I talked to a pastor the other day, and who oversees 30 churches, and 2 of his churches are needing to close down because they just can't afford to keep rent because they have no income coming in, and so they're going to have to close their doors because of that.
Have to keep praying for God's leading, guidance, wisdom, and discernment through these difficult times.
Absolutely.
Pastor Kelly Stickle with My Victory Churches in Lethbridge, Southern Alberta. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to wreak havoc around the world, many are grappling with loneliness, anxiety, and depression. It seems like we've lost control, and perhaps we've lost a little hope. Today's guest has some timely advice and encouragement. Dr. Greg Jantz is a psychologist and author and founder of the Center, a Place of Hope, one of the top facilities for treatment of depression in the U.S. His latest book is 5 Keys to Health and Healing. Dr. Greg Jantz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, such an important topic, and good to be with you today.
Awesome. So your book starts out by saying everyone struggles with challenges in life, but we all need hope. Why is hope so vital to our health?
Well, you take this panic pandemic we've been in. I'm calling it a panic pandemic, but now we've got to shift and look at this pandemic with a purpose. And the purpose has got to be, we've got to reset some things in our life. And so what I talk about, and we work with folks who come in from all over to work on anxiety and depression. And the reason being is we've reached an emotional saturation point. People have reached their limit. They're on this edge of despair. And so today our topic of hope, and hope comes when you have a plan. Today we want to help begin to create a plan for hope.
Yeah, exactly. Now, why is it that we tend to worry so much? And how can we learn to control our thought life?
Yeah, how about that? We have a lot to worry about right now, too. It's where we put our point of focus. Some of us learn to be really good worriers. And so you have a pandemic, you have a lot to worry about. And we can keep layering our life with worry, which will take us to anxiety. By the way, if you have anxiety, if you have physical symptoms. So I got sweaty palms, my heart rate's up, shortness of breath, digestive, aches and pains. You've got anxiety. So I can take worry and turn it into anxiety, but I need to stop and hit that pause button today and go, okay, what do I really need to change? Well, one of the things we've got to change is how we think. and we need to learn, what's it mean to renew our thinking? What's it mean to begin to put the truth in? Because worry and anxiety, it distorts reality.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going through that right now too, especially with everything that's going on. Yeah. Now, you suggest in your book that gratitude or a thankful heart is actually an antidote for toxic thinking. How so?
Yes, gratitude. What an interesting word at this time. You go, I don't have much to be thankful for. And we get into that thinking mode. What if, just what if the next 30 days you decided, I'm going to live a little differently. I'm going to start my day with 3 gratitudes. 3 gratitudes. I'm going to write down, I'm going to create a gratitude journal. Here you go. I'm going to start today. I'm going to write down my 3 gratitudes every day. And just, maybe it's something really simple, which is usually the best gratitudes. But notice over time that gratitude begins to change our perspective. Gratitude moves us from being self-absorbed to we begin to see, well, maybe there's others I can be of help. Gratitude begins to create something called optimism. Optimism means I have hope. I'm looking towards the future. So let's create more optimism right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's so easy to allow those negative emotions to take control. So, I mean, like anger and fear, right? So you refer in your book to anger, fear, and guilt as an emotionally toxic trinity. Can you explain?
Oh, yes. Anger, I call them the 3 deadly emotions. Anger, fear, and guilt. Anger, another word for anger could be hurt. Another word for anger could be frustration. Hey, by the way, we have a lot to possibly be angry and frustrated with right now. But as we start looking and going, okay, am I going to be ruled by anger and hurt? Maybe I need to figure out some forgiveness here. So there's anger. If I'm going to be healthy, I've got to learn how to deal with anger and frustration. The next one's fear, worry, anxiety. Fear is the great paralyzer. Fear keeps us in a place of paralyzation. We don't take much action. We're afraid. We hold inward. That's fear. And then there's guilt. Guilt can be usually shame. I feel like I'm defective. I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. So we've got to figure out to be emotionally healthy, anger, fear, and guilt.
Wow. Now, during this COVID-19 pandemic, so many have had to live in isolation, unfortunately. Now, how does this impact our health and wellness?
Yeah. So we take quarantine, and I'm doing this because quarantine holds you in, confinement, and we mix this with it's too long. Quarantine that lasts too long ends up creating more and more anxiety and depression. So really, what we're preparing for is we have a mental health pandemic. We're going to have more mental health issues emerging as they are already than ever before. And so we want to be prepared to deal with this. We want to be prepared to really deal with the anxiety and depression. It's going to be, I think we could say right now, anxiety is an epidemic. Who don't you know who's struggling with some anxiety and everything that's going on? So that's why, my mission is, and our mission here at the Center, A Place of Hope, is to change lives for good, to equip you with God's help. We don't know exact outcomes, but we know that we can change our perspective. We're going to use this as a time to reset. Reset means, okay, I don't like what I'm in, but I'm going to grow. It's going to be a pandemic with a purpose for me. I'm not going to be defeated by this.
Wow. This isolation reduces the opportunity to maintain our relationships too. Now, in your book, you talk about the importance and the qualities of good relationships.
Yes. So relationships. So if we're isolated, maybe many of our relationships have been digital. Oh boy. And we've been over digitalized. Yeah, our relationships. And here's the issue. It's okay as an emergency provision to be able to have all the ways we can communicate digitally. But you know what? We need one another. And we're designed for touch. We're designed for hugs. We're designed for in-person interactions. And so let's remember the importance of that. It really is important. So as we emerge, reintegrate from all this, we need to remember real life relationships are.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, speaking of relationships, you believe that it's important to have an accountability partner. So what exactly does this mean?
Well, if we're going to keep growing, and we've come through a mode where we've been shocked and traumatized by everything, and things felt like out of our control, and now we're moving into this growth mode. It's a mode that says, well, in order to keep growing, I need accountability. I just can't say, hey, I'm going to go out and do my 20-minute walk a couple times a day. Well, who are you holding that standard with? So we all need one another.
Yeah, it helps us to stay on track, doesn't it, right? Yeah, 100%. Now, you mentioned a daily walk. So you're a psychologist, not a fitness trainer, obviously, but you say that physical fitness is very important to maintain emotional health. Makes sense.
Oh, we've got to keep the movement up. Movement is so important. Movement and water. Have your water, okay? And one of the things, when we get full of anxiety, we tend not to drink our water. We tend to drink other things. So keep water up, keep movement up. The difference over time, it's just not one time. The difference over time will make a big difference.
I'm so glad now they have those flavored waters too, because water's not my favorite. It definitely helps me get the water
Come on,
in.
let's have your water today.
Good advice. Now, I wonder how many people will continue to isolate even after the restrictions are lifted, simply out of fear. What's your advice on this?
Don't let fear keep you paralyzed. Fear distorts reality. And maybe you need to test the waters. But we have been conditioned during this period to feel fear. There's the fear of the what if. So what if? What if this virus comes back? What if? And so we have all these potential what ifs that can create fear. So just as fear is kind of contagious. If we're afraid, we all kind of run together. Remember, courageousness is contagious. So let's be courageous. Let's create a positive direction. Now, I don't mean that's super easy to do, but we can do this together. Let's be courageous.
Yeah, sounds great. It's just hard to practice sometimes, isn't it?
Oh, sure.
Now, in your book, you talked about the fact that God is in control, even while so much of our lives are out of control these days, especially. So how can we learn to actually embrace this and be at peace with that?
Yeah. Here's what we need to know. It's a real test of faith. I'm going to decide fear or faith. And I got to keep deciding on this faith side. But one of the things is we're going to see, and I've seen it personally, we're going to see, wow, through all this, through this sheltering, God has been my shelter. God has been my shelter. And I'm growing through this. And every time in biblical history that God has sheltered someone and people have been sheltered, there's been a victory. So let's be on the victory outlook, shall we?
Yeah, good idea. Now, is it possible that God sometimes allows us to face uncertainty so that we learn to build our faith and trust in Him?
Yeah, that's why I say, well, how about this? Pandemic with a purpose. The purpose is I'm walking through some things that may be extremely stressful, may be really rough. I'm walking through those. Let's keep it up.
Good advice, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Jantz. It was such a pleasure to have you on our show.
Nice to be with you today, and let's just say it, there is hope.
Exactly. That is Dr. Greg Jantz. He is the author of 5 Keys to Health and Healing, available at aplaceofhope.com.
Teenagers are often frustrated with their parents for the rules they need to follow, and parents get frustrated sometimes with their kids not following the rules. Well, today's guest is 20 years of age, used to be a teenager not that long ago, and has some helpful advice on how to smooth out some of the wrinkles. Lissy Reno is the author of the book, The Heart of Your Teen, an insider look at the parent-teen relationship. Lissy, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Now, I like that, an insider look at the parent-teen relationship. Lissy, explain what motivated you to write the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually come from a big family, so I'm one of 7 kids, and my parents lead a ministry called Visionary Family. And so after high school, I actually took a gap year and I spent half the year at home working with my parents and working with their ministry. And it was really during that time that God really just put this passion on my heart for reaching out to teenagers and helping encourage teenagers in their family relationships. Because no matter what kind of family you have, family relationships are hard for everyone. And no matter what kind of phase of life you're at, and especially during the teen years. And so I kind of began on this journey of helping teenagers kind of look into their family relationships and ask the question, so what does it mean to live for Christ first at home with our families and then everywhere else? And so I began speaking to some youth groups and some churches, and that's when I got connected with a publishing company here in Nashville called Randall House. And Randall House had published a couple of my parents' books, and they reached out to me and they said, hey, Lissy, we'd be really interested in you doing a book project with us, but we don't want you to write a book for teenagers. We want you to write a book for parents on how to have a better relationship with their middle school, high school age child. And at first, I was not excited about the idea at all. I was like, I'm not a parent. I'm not an expert on parenting. I was like, maybe I could write a page about this, but there's no way it could be a whole book. But my parents really encouraged me, and they were like, okay, Lissy, if God is opening up this door for you, then walk through it and see what happens.
So what are some of the biggest misunderstandings parents have about their teenagers besides defining what a clean bedroom should really look like?
Right. So the best part of this whole project actually was I got to interview teenagers from across the country and ask the question, so what did your parents do really well while you were in high school to help build a relationship with you? And what's one thing that you wish they had done differently? And some of the answers that I received absolutely blew me away. And that's what got me really excited about this book. And some of the things that teenagers said were like, I really wish that my parents would ask me more intentional questions about my life. I really wish they taught me more accountability with my technology and my social media. I really wish my parents would pray more with us as a family or read the Bible more with us as a family. And those answers were like across the board. And so as I started talking to more people and getting those responses, I was like, wow, this could be an incredible message for parents to hear from their teenagers about what they want in that relationship.
Now, you're right that when parents give advice and instruction to their kids, sometimes it can maybe backfire a little bit unless it's done in a relational basis. Can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the whole premise of The Heart of Your Teen is that this idea that relationship has to come before discipleship. So before parents could try and have a discipleship relationship with their child, there has to be the foundation of a loving relationship first. And so the first chapter of the book talks all about how parents can build the foundation of that relationship. And what the book calls it, I talk about what having a heart-connected relationship looks like. So a heart connection relationship is one that's full of openness, honesty, trust, and love. So it talks a lot to parents about, okay, what's a great way that you can spend quality time with your teenager? Speak words of affirmation to your teenager. Have fun with them. Pursue their interests, engage in what they love to do and help build the foundation of that relationship.
So how can you create a relationship that is a safe place for your teenager to talk about some key or controversial issues?
Mm-hmm. So I talk about that a lot in a chapter that I write. And really, it's kind of a two-part issue. In talking to teenagers, I found that a lot of parents tend to be kind of on the extremes of certain things. So you have parents that are filled with a lot of grace for their kids, to the point where maybe they're not pointing out certain issues that they might have. And then you have a lot of parents that maybe are full of a lot of truth, but don't have a lot of grace. And so what I've found and what's been really helpful in my personal relationship with my parents is that there has to be that combination of grace and truth that pair together. So parents that, some things that my parents would tell me that really helped me in high school were, Lissy, we're committed to you. We love you. No matter what mistakes you make, no matter what you do in your life, we are always going to be committed to you in love. But they would also tell me some things that were really hard to hear sometimes and speak truth into my life where I needed to hear truth. So I really think that one of the most important aspects of having those difficult conversations is to have both the grace and the truth present.
Now, when it comes to parenting, discipline is also a big part of the relationship as well. I remember when my son was really young, really little, he hated, being put into the corner, staring at the walls when he did something he shouldn't do. It's like, this is driving me crazy, please stop, I'm not gonna do that ever again, right? Can you talk a bit about discipline versus the need for affirmation and encouragement?
Absolutely. So one thing that I noticed in talking with teenagers is that a lot of them talked about how when they were little, their parents gave more direct consequences. So you do something wrong, you get a consequence. But as they kind of grow up and as we kind of become teenagers, the consequences decrease while the lectures increase. And oftentimes those lectures can be filled with a lot of anger, a lot of bitterness, a lot of annoyance, sometimes on both sides for the parent and for the teenager. And so something that a lot of kids said that as I was talking to them, they're like, I think that if my parents gave me a direct consequence, that would actually preserve our relationship more. Because those lectures, all that it's doing is pulling the hearts of teenagers and parents away from each other. Because when that anger gets in, when that bitterness gets in, when that defiance enters in, I think that can be the real problem. And so for me and my parents, a lot of times if they gave me a direct consequence, it actually preserved our relationship better than them, acting out of anger or giving me this long conversation.
Like a reactive reaction, knee-jerk reaction. How can parents effectively get their teens to take their faith seriously and really make it their own?
Yeah, well, I think that I've seen, just as I've been growing up and kind of diving into this topic more, and like I said, how I am not an expert on parenting. I am not a parent myself, so all I can really give is sort of just my observations of what I've seen and what's been really helpful for me. But something that impacted me the most as a teenager and as I've been kind of becoming more independent and making my faith my own is just, first of all, my parents communicating their commitment to me. That was huge. The next would be seeing the faith of my parents active in their own lives. When I come down in the morning to see my dad at the breakfast table with his Bible open and doing his devotions, or my mom sharing with me about how her faith is impacting her personal life. And then also my parents just being willing to allow me to make some decisions about my faith, to press into the fact, it's okay to have doubts sometimes. It's okay to question what you believe. It's actually a good thing to be able to wrestle through those feelings and decide for yourself what you believe. But something that my parents did that was so helpful was just they always communicated that if I was having those feelings or if I was having doubts, they were the safest people in the world for me to talk to about those things. And I could come to them with anything that I was feeling and they would listen and be able to help me sift through that.
It's not uncommon for a teenager today to say to their parents, I'm not going to church anymore. That's it. I'm done. I'm out. How should parents really handle a situation like that?
I think that's really tough. And I also think it depends on the age of your child. Now, if the child is in middle school, if I were a parent, I would say, okay, if we're paying for your life, if you're living under our roof, you're going to come to church with us because that's what our family does. Now, maybe your teenager is in college and independent and they're not wanting to go to church. Well, at that point, I don't know how much of the parents can force the child to do something, because at that point, you don't want to force your child to be a Christian or to actively live out their faith. It has to be a choice that they make for themselves. So I think a lot of it has to do with parents kind of offering that encouragement, again, offering that commitment, and going back to the base of that relationship. Because, if you have a healthy relational base with your teenager or with your child, no matter what age you are, it's going to be so much easier to have those types of conversations about faith and about church and all of that.
A lot of parents want respect from their teenagers, and I guess teens also want respect from mom and dad too. What needs to happen in order for mutual respect to be there?
During my senior year of high school, God really just convicted me on exactly that issue. And I think it really has to do with the fifth commandment, the call to honor your father and mother. Because for a long time, growing up in my house, and my dad's a pastor, and I was always the good kid on the outside, like, all my teachers and all my friends would always be like, "Oh, Lissy, you're so great, you're so mature, you're so wise." But at home, my parents would be like, "Okay, Lissy, you were rude to your sister yesterday. We see you being a little selfish in these areas. We think you need to work on this, this, and this." And really, I think where God really convicted me the most was that, yes, I was obedient to my parents. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't going out and doing all these things. But the attitude of my heart was one of defiance and bitterness and selfishness. And so it's that piece of what is obedience versus honor, because honor starts in the heart and obedience overflows from that. But if I was having just the actions on the outside that were making me a good kid, but my heart was full of dishonor towards my parents. And so I think that that's something for parents who, even if they have kids that are really young, to be able to start discipling that. Because, my parents could tell. If they told me to do something and I obeyed them but had a terrible attitude about it, they knew. And so I think parents can really start seeing that in their kids and start helping them disciple them in those areas.
Now let's talk a bit about social media and technology. What kinds of boundaries should parents be putting in place?
Well, how that is really a hard issue, because social media and technology it's everywhere for teenagers, and it's how we communicate, and it's just so ingrained in our lives. But what I talk about in the book, and there's a chapter on technology, is that really the key ingredient, and the key ingredient in our home was accountability. Because, as parents, you are never going to be able to keep absolutely all the junk outside of your child's life at all times. I mean, it's just impossible in the world that we live in. But in our house, we had to create this culture of accountability. And so when I got my phone, when I got my social media, my parents really communicated to me that, Lissy, your phone is not your private information. Like, we have the right to look at your phone at any time that we want. And even my dad, he would be like, "Look, Lissy, I don't even think that I'm above accountability. I need, I have accountability partners, and I have, these internet blocking services. And so we want to work together to create an accountability atmosphere in our home, because, that we have this saying that no one is holy enough for a secret online life, whether you're a middle schooler or an adult."
Now, we should also probably talk a bit about dating and the challenges of remaining pure in a sex-saturated world, Lissy. What advice do you have for parents and teenagers when it comes to sex?
I mean, that is a really tough question. And again, I think that it all goes back to that piece of the heart-connected relationship that you have with your child. And so I remember when I was in 8th grade, I think I had a crush on a boy at school. And I just really felt this urge that I needed to be sharing those feelings that I was having with my dad, or just get some advice from him and talk to him. And I just remember having this pit in the bottom of my stomach. It was the last thing in the world that I wanted to do. It just absolutely made me sick. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I have a great relationship with my dad. I love my dad. I know my dad loves me. Why am I so afraid to talk to him about these things? And really, I have come to really believe that that was spiritual attack coming against the relationship that I had with my dad. And so I think so much of that, dealing with relationships and sex and dating and all of that, is, if kids feel like their parents are safe people to talk to, then, that's a win. That is a win for that relationship, because what the world is going to say is to teenagers is you should talk to everyone else. You should talk to your friends. You should talk to your mentors. You should talk to your youth group leaders. But the last person in the world to talk to is your parents, because there's that fear, that shame and embarrassment. And so I think if parents can really work through that and help build the relationship of trust and openness, that would be so helpful in navigating all of those relationships.
Leslie Reno is the author of Heart of Your Teen, an insider look at the parent-teen relationship. Thanks a lot for joining us today from Nashville, Tennessee.
Thanks for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.